Welcome inside this edition of Big Ten Today, presented by Old National Bank. Rick Pizzo, thrilled to be joined by Dave Wanstead. I hope that Santa was very kind to you this year and left exactly what you wanted under the tree.
Absolutely. Every year.
Every year.
I'm always a good boy.
Of course you are.
I know the times of year to be a good boy.
Do I need to check in at home to confirm that statement?
No, really. The reality is, at my age with 6 grandkids, this is Santa. You're looking at him right here, okay?
Every day he offers me the kind of gifts that I've asked for. It's a lot less stressful holiday season for you these days than it was when you were coaching.
Yep.
But it's also a huge benefit for coaches, not just in bowl games, Dave, but because they get those extra 15 practices. So regardless of what bowl you're playing in, regardless of what program that you lead, what is this time like, and what's the most important thing right now for coaches to take care of?
Yeah, you brought up the practices, and we were talking this morning before the show. You would think, okay, a team that's got 5 wins, a Minnesota, boy, is their practice time more valuable than maybe Michigan? And it's really not. I mean, everything is relative, and particularly in today's atmosphere out there in college football with the transfer portals and the NFL guys. I mean, this is a great opportunity, number one, to coach your players, okay, and get your hands on them with everything going on, and kind of put your arm around them, and coach them up and give them some attention that maybe they weren't getting during the regular season, and make them feel that they have a future at your school. So, I think a lot has the transfer portal, a lot of these guys right now, because you can go at any time, I think these spring practice or the bowl practices can really make a difference in keeping a player. The other side of it might be too, Rick,
Yep.
They could leave. The other thing too that I always did here, I was just thinking about it, recruiting. This was a great time to get recruits to come in, underclassmen. They come in unofficially and they're just watching practice, and you get a chance to see your facility. They get a chance to meet some of the other players. Along with that, I would invite a lot of high school coaches. Think about, it's spring practice. If they're not in spring practice, then summer camp, they're busy with summer camp. This is a perfect time to get some high school coaches to come in, see your program, sit in a meeting, coach, talk some football afterwards. And the one thing that I did, I would invite the faculty over. I mean, hey, come on, we would have a faculty day. Come on over, and because you'd be amazing how many of these professors at these schools, they're not involved in it on a day-to-day basis, but yet they're dealing with your athletes. Great time to put your arm around them. Sometimes I put my arm around them a little more than I did some of my players.
That's why it makes so much sense. I look in those bookcases of yours, and you have Aristotle and Plato and Confucius and Adam Smith. He is a well-versed man, much more than just a football coach.
One more point. Don't get bored. What happens in these big games, you got so much time off. Coaches always want to get in there and start drawing stuff up. Sometimes it's good to do that, okay, and come up with some new ideas. But sometimes something that's been good for you, you can talk yourself out of it. When you got a week, 2 weeks, 3, 4 weeks since your last game, now you're going to play in a bowl game. We did that when we were playing. We were going to play in the Orange Bowl, and I had met with Buddy Ryan from the Bears to put in the Bear defense. And don't you know that we never used it all year because we never got bored. We did what we did best at Miami. Now we're playing Nebraska in the Orange Bowl, and we pulled out the Bear defense.
How'd that go?
Coach, 31-3. That's pretty good. I didn't even get out at halftime. It was going so good. I stayed up and listened to the Temptations in the press box.
Now, sometimes you should just stick with what's working, though. And when it comes to Minnesota, they just stick to what's working. And what's worked for PJ Fleck, what's worked for a lot of teams, is running the football and winning the football. We'll get to Minnesota in a second. You start to look at some of the Big Ten bowl games. They're the most recent Big Ten team to win. 2 games have been played. It was Minnesota over Bowling Green, 30-24. Darius Taylor, outstanding. But the first bowl game of the year, Northwestern, Utah. And what a story. I mean, I think at the beginning of the year, David Braun takes over. He's the DC. He's never coached a game at any level as a head coach. He steps in for Pat Fitzgerald after the hazing scandal goes down at Northwestern. Most people believe, Dave, I think if Northwestern won 2, maybe 3 games, that it would have been fine. We're going to move on. We're going to get a permanent head coach. They win 7 games during the regular season. They beat a really good Utah team in the Las Vegas Bowl. And I know that maybe folks don't pay as much attention as if this was a New Year's Six bowl game, certainly not if it was a college football playoff. I think you can absolutely make the case that this is the most surprising and most impressive story in all of college football, not the Big Ten, all of college football this season.
I'm on board with you 100%. You know, you mentioned the good Utah team. You know, I have played against Utah. Kyle Whittingham, the coach at Utah.
Great coach.
One thing about this football team, coach, you won't play they're on the caliber of a Michigan. They are as physical as anybody in the country. And Northwestern lined up, and they went toe-to-toe with these guys. And the other thing, too, that people lose sight of, you know, David Braum gets the contract. He's going to be the coach. There's coaches looking for jobs. Some are staying. Some are leaving. There's a lot of potential distractions for a game like this. And he lines up, and the difference in this game, I said they went show to show. They don't turn the football over. And Utah turns it over twice. And you look and say, well, what are some of the off-the-field things that we're not seeing? Hey, they ended up, other than Michigan, Penn State, they were 4th in the Big Ten in least amount in turnover margin. They were plus 13. So they didn't give anything away, and you would think new staff, all the off-the-field issues, that they would be distracted. What happens when you get distracted? You put the ball on the ground. We've seen that all across college football. This team, these guys kept this football team motivated and focused week after week.
Well, and you brought up the transfer portal. I don't think we've talked enough about the job that David Braun and this staff did in keeping the players in place with all this stuff going on. Very few departures, so we don't get inside that locker room. We don't know exactly what he was saying to all the players, but you've been in a lot of meeting rooms. You've been with a lot of different staffs. Whatever David Braun and this staff were selling to the players and to this program overall, every single guy was buying it.
Yeah, and you know, if I'm a recruit or parent or a high school coach, I want to go to Northwestern and hear what he has to say. How did this happen? What's your recipe for success? Because there's something there.
All right, time for today's big stat. Northwestern picks up the first win of bowl season for the Big Ten. Minnesota picks up the second, and we should have just expected that because the Gophers have now won 7 consecutive bowl games. Look at Northwestern in there with the 3rd longest streak with 5 consecutive wins. And this is not just in the Big Ten. This is nationally. Georgia has 6. Obviously, Georgia will play Florida State this year in another New Year's Six bowl game. But the Gophers have already gotten to 7. And I brought up Darius Taylor.
Right.
He was the star of that Quick Lane Bowl win over Bowling Green. And Minnesota not going outside of its identity, not doing anything different than it normally does. At one point, they had a drive in the second half, 11 plays, 11 runs. It reminded me of what Michigan did in the second half against Penn State when they ran it 22 consecutive times. Everybody in the city of Detroit knew that the run was coming, and Bowling Green still couldn't stop it.
Yeah, and you know that running game. I mean, obviously that's PJ Fleck's DNA. I mean, going back to Mo Ibrahim last year, and really that brings up a point. You know, when you look at the job that PJ Fleck did this year, he lost some outstanding players. We talk about Mo running the ball. How about Tanner Morgan, right? 3 or 4 year starter there. Terrell Smith, who's playing for the Bears right now.
Banged up, injury-wise.
I mean, they were banged. So he had to deal with a lot. And then all of a sudden you get into the bowl game and your quarterback goes in the transfer portal. Your defensive coordinator, Joe Rossi, you know, who's regarded as one of the best in the country, has done a fantastic job. He leaves and goes to Michigan State. So graduation, transfer portal, coaches leaving. You know, this was not an easy task. And PJ, they found a way to win it. And I'll tell you what, we got those practices, and PJ was putting his arm around a lot of people during those couple weeks. So fantastic for him, something to build on going forward.
Yeah, including Cole Kramer, the backup quarterback with Ethan Kaliakmanis in that transfer portal, and that great side story that Cole and his fiancée.
I hope they please get married.
Just about to get married, maybe a little bit of help with the wedding. We'll see. A lot of stories surrounding either way. We know the fact is that Minnesota has won a 7th consecutive bowl game. 30-24 is the final. So next man up, your good friend, Greg Schiano and Rutgers. They're set to take on a program that you knew very well in the University of Miami. It was a great start to the year for Greg. We knew that schedule was backloaded and that Rutgers was going to have a really tough time beating the teams that are on their November schedule. But still, it is a bowl game. It is a step in the right direction. And you beat a good Miami team, and you can truly take that into 2024 because you know Greg extremely well. Yeah. He is not content with just getting to bowl games. He wants this team to compete to win Big Ten championships in the new look league that begins next year.
Yeah, I like him in this game. I'll tell you what, Mario Cristobal, the history of that, Mario played at Miami, Greg coached at Miami. Then Mario was the offensive line and tight end coach for Schiano the first time when Greg was at Rutgers the first time. So they do have a great relationship, and they're still good friends. But I'll tell you what, this fits up good for Rutgers because run the ball, right?
Oh, Kyle Monungai can do that.
Coach, I had no idea. I mean, I did from doing the shows every week. But when you start looking at his numbers in the Big Ten and around the country as far as yards and yards after contact, and making guys miss, all these things that they come up with, analytics. I mean, this guy's in the top 5, top 2 in most categories.
Dave, I said it to you, and I truly believe this. I think he might be the most underrated running back in the nation. You think about how much Rutgers relies on him. You think about the style that they want to play, control the clock, don't turn the ball over, beat you in between the tackles. And the numbers that you brought up about his fourth quarter production and how he gets better after he's carried the ball 20, 25 times a game, that's what makes him arguably the most valuable player to any team inside this league.
Yeah, and their defense, is going to be up in there. They fell off a little bit, but they're in the top half, and they're gonna give you bad plays if you're not prepared for them. Schiano does as good as anybody as far as moving those linemen, bringing linebackers, a lot of pressure. It's a pressure defense, and Miami right now, their quarterback opted out. They got 8 other players that are either going to the NFL, according to them, or the transfer portal. And I'll tell you this from coaching in Miami, these guys, Coach, New
Nobody
York,
wants to come to New York in late December?
They're not going to want to get off the bus. Forget about going to the stadium. Cristobal's going to have to be pulling these guys off the bus. I know it's snowing out, guys. Get off the bus. We got a football game to play.
Kick just after 2 o'clock Eastern on Thursday. And, of course, we'll have complete highlights, reaction from that Bad Boy Mowers Pinstripe Bowl matchup between Rutgers and Miami coming up in the Thursday edition of The Big Show. All I want for Christmas is to have a football practice after I unwrap my presents. That's absolutely not true. But if you're playing in some of the biggest bowl games in the year, that's what you do. Ohio State getting ready on Christmas Day as the Buckeyes get set to take on Mizzou in the Cotton Bowl. Rick Pizzo back with Dave Wanstead. To me, one of the most surprising aspects of this game or any bowl game is how many players from Ohio State, including Marvin Harrison Jr., say they're going to play in the Cotton Bowl. Now, you could not blame Harrison or some other guys, maybe Cade Stover or Denzel Burke, if they said, you know what, respect the team, respect the game, but it's not a playoff. I'm going to be a pretty high draft pick. I'm ready to go to that level. They've all said we're going to play and we're going to win.
Yeah, it is amazing. And Kyle McCord, the one guy who you would thought would have been
now part
there,
of Syracuse,
he's gone. So, I think you got to say that's a credit to Ryan Day and his staff that these kids that they're invested in Ohio State. Obviously, they're committed. They want to get another win. Everybody at this time of year has got their own little motivation, whatever it might be. But it's all good, and I think it's a great matchup for them. We're talking, you named 3 or 4 of their outstanding, great offensive players, because when you look at Missouri and you look at their defense, I mean, they are in the bottom half of the country. I mean, they're giving up 20-some points a game, 5.5 yards a carry. They have struggled. I mean, the strength of Missouri has been that running game, but they got a great back, Doak Walker finalist, and they got a real, obviously, good receiver. But their defense against this Ohio State offense, I mean, all these guys show up and play. This is going to be a big, big help to Devin Brown. It will be,
If all those guys show up and play. Now we're going off of what Ryan Day has told us, right? He said Lathan Ransom right now.
3 days before the game.
He said Lathan Ransom right now is the only guy who has told him he's opting out. He's not going to play in this game. Now, Marvin Harrison was at practice yesterday, apparently didn't participate. So decisions could be made clearly before Friday night. But at this point, you would think if you're in, you're in. And if you're out, you're out. There also always comes that question of motivation. And I think, obviously, I don't think that's a question here. Otherwise, all of these guys wouldn't say they're playing, because there are those from the outside that would say, well, this game's bigger for Missouri than it is for Ohio State because the Buckeyes expected to be in the playoff. Missouri didn't. I'm sure that Eli Drinkwitz, the head coach at Missouri, is trying to sell that in his locker room, but I don't believe that to be the case with Ohio State this year.
No, and as we were just talking, I hope it's not a case. You remember a couple years ago, I think it was, it might have been Joe Burrow or no, it wasn't Joe, or somebody, a big name player went to the bowl game, and then it was at LSU because it was Ed Ogeron. I forget the player. And then when he got down there, he says, oh, no, he's not going to play. You know what I mean? So they just said that just to kind of let the other team think that these guys were going to play. I hope that's not the case with Marvin Harrison, because it all comes down to practice. Who's in the game plan, right? And obviously if Marvin's playing, he's got to be a big part of the game plan. I mean, or he wouldn't play. And so it'll be interesting to see if these guys have been practicing. I got to believe 3 days before the game, Rick, that they're going to play.
Yeah, and you know that Missouri has been practicing to defend Marvin Harrison. There's a lot of other guys on that team, but he is expected to be a top 5, if not maybe the #1 overall pick in next spring's draft, a generational talent. It's Ohio State, Missouri Cotton Bowl, Friday, 8 o'clock Eastern. Another New Year's Six bowl game for Penn State as the Nittany Lions get set to take on Ole Miss, this in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. And I think this, Dave, boils down to being another show-me game for James Franklin, right? You have a team that wins 10 games, again, at Penn State, but the calls from the outside, or those who do criticize, are the losses are to Ohio State, the loss is to Michigan. When are we going to win one of these big-time games? You know what I think of James Franklin. I think he's an outstanding coach. Right. I think he's a terrific recruiter. I think he's a great person overall. But this is the kind of game, in my opinion, that you have to win to quiet some of that criticism.
Yeah, and they should win this game. The only thing that makes you nervous about this game, Lane Kiffin, the coach, right, for Ole Miss, he is outstanding, and he always is going to come up with something else. I mean, their offense is one of the better ones in the country, so this is going to be a matchup. When I look at this game, it's going to be that defense, okay, of Penn State. And the matchup in my mind is the offense of Ole Miss, the defense of Penn State. That's where I think it's going to be.
So how much of a difference does it make then that Manny Diaz, the former DC, who spent 2 outstanding years with James Franklin, left to become the head coach at Duke?
Yeah, you know what? Absolutely, and Chop Robinson's not going to play.
Chop Robinson is the one kind of like star defensive player who said he's not going to play.
First-round draft pick, so that's going to affect them a little bit. But on the other side too, Ole Miss got guys who are going to be sitting out. I think how's it going to affect Penn State? It won't affect them in the scheme and the game plan. But the thing that you don't know is now it's a critical 3rd down and 10, Rick, okay? Are we going to pressure them? Are we going to defend? Are we going to play 2 deep, or are we going to play a 1 deep? I mean, that's decisions at the core.
But doesn't this go back to what you said at the very beginning of the show? If you've had so much success doing that all year, why would you change regardless of who's actually making the calls?
You shouldn't. That's exactly right. And I think James Franklin has been a head coach long enough that he's going to be involved with everything. If all of a sudden they've got a lead in the game and it's the end of the game and the defensive guy wants to blitz them, that's James's responsibility to step in and say, guys, I want to defend right here. Let's rush 4 and play coverage. No blitz right here. So he'll have his hand in this, particularly, I think, more so than he normally would if Manny Diaz was there.
Even after playing Ohio State and Michigan, Penn State's given up less than 12 points per game this year, basically half of what Ole Miss has allowed. So that edge, you would think, goes to Penn State as long as they are able to continue to play to their identity. One of the more interesting matchups to me, and one of the more interesting scenarios in the Big Ten postseason, is Maryland's matchup with Auburn. And really, it's more for me about the Terps because Taulia Tagovailoa has said he is getting ready for the NFL draft. Yes. He has been not just something to what Mike Locksley has done the last couple of years. He has been everything to what this offense has done. And I know that Billy Edwards is highly thought of in the run game. I'm just fascinated to see what can Maryland be offensively without Leah under center?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think that they're going to have to adjust a little bit. And the good news is that Maryland's defense has improved, right? So they're a lot better defense right now than what they've been in years past. So I think Maryland, I think this is a great opportunity for Mike Locksley to go in there and challenge that offensive line. And they got good running backs, right? I mean, so this is a game where you're going to have to, it's going to be a little different look. You're going to play a little closer to the vest. You're going to run the ball, which we should be able to have success running against this team. And then we'll set up the play action pass. So I think the game plan just has to change a little bit, and players will accept that challenge. Mike Locksley, he'll do a good job of saying, hey, this is on you, offensive line, in the running game. We're going to run the ball, and defense, which will help the defense. So I'm anxious to see this. I think it's a good challenge for them. I really do. And I think they'll rise to the occasion.
I think the run game needs to be specified because I don't think it's just Roman Hemby and the rest of these running backs. I think it's how much they get Billy Edwards, who is a really good runner, involved. Because, as you know, as a former defensive coordinator, kind of the ultimate fix when you don't have the pass game going, when you don't have all of your weapons on offense, the ultimate fix is a quarterback who can hurt you with the run, maybe even design runs, because it forces the defense to either use a spy or you're not going hat on a hat.
It puts a lot more stress. You're exactly right on the defense, and we've seen that week in and week out. Hey, it's a possible pass situation. Will the quarterback run it? Quarterback draw, quarterback option. So no question that Billy Edwards, he's going to have a chance to do some good things, and this might be a little bit of a philosophy change going forward for Maryland.
Hey, listen, Mike Locksley's a great offensive mind, terrific play caller. I'm fascinated to see what he comes up with no Leah in this bowl game, the Music City Bowl against Auburn. My 3 favorite sports days of the year: opening round of the NCAA tournament, Master Sunday, and January 1st. You are awash in football. 3 Big Ten games on New Year's Day: Wisconsin LSU in the ReliaQuest Bowl, Iowa Tennessee in the Citrus Bowl, and of course the granddaddy, Alabama and Michigan in the college football playoff semifinal. Let's do this chronologically, shall we? Wisconsin LSU. It has been an interesting season in year 1 for Luke Fickell. You had quarterback issues with injuries to Tanner Mordecai. Early, the defense wasn't what we thought it would be. Wisconsin won games that perhaps they weren't supposed to, lost games that they weren't supposed to. Now they head in against a top 15 SEC team, and an SEC team, Dave, that can score points in bunches.
Yes, they do. And I guess the good news is LSU won't be with their starting quarterback, correct?
You try to find the best of news in these games.
That's a start. If I'm Luke Fickell, that's a good starting point for me. But yeah, with Wisconsin, it was a funny thing from the standpoint, and I think injuries had a lot to do with it. But I know defensively they really started off being they wanted to be a 3-5-3. I mean, they were tossing around a lot of numbers from the standpoint that I was trying to figure out exactly what they were committed to.
Right. What is the philosophy?
Yeah, what is the philosophy here? And then Phil Longo, the offensive coordinator, comes from North Carolina, and everybody was scared to death that it was going to be a run and gun offense. And he came back and said, no, we ran the ball at North Carolina. So the one thing that I think they did consistently with Braylon Allen was run the football and run it successfully, which has always been Wisconsin's DNA.
Yeah, so what do they do offensively now? Allen has declared, obviously, Ches Malusi was lost for the year with that nasty injury early in the season. The offensive line was okay, but maybe not up to typical Wisconsin standards. Listen, you're still going to have to score points to beat LSU no matter who's playing quarterback.
Right. No question about it. They got skill guys. They got a bunch of receivers back, running back. The one thing about LSU is they do commit they'll make a lot of mistakes.
Yes.
They'll make a lot of penalties. So in this bowl game, I think you just got to come in and say, hey, we don't have to make more great plays than them. This would be a great game. Let's make less mistakes than LSU. We can win this game.
If the year was a little topsy-turvy for Wisconsin, I'm not sure exactly how you describe it for Kirk Ferentz, because it had to be such a strange year. So much criticism on the offense that his son and OC Brian Ferentz is told with a couple of games left in the season, you're not coming back next year. Kirk wasn't happy about that, said, listen, I've done this for a quarter century. We always make these decisions at the end of the year. Yet they overcome it enough to get to the Big Ten championship game, and they lose, as expected, against a really, really good Michigan team, the number 1 seed in the college football playoff. But now you have a chance once again to shock the world, beat an SEC team, win 11 games
Yeah.
this year. That's right. Iowa wins this game. It is an 11-win season for the Hawkeyes.
Yeah, I would. You talk about short list of Coach of the Year in the Big Ten. I mean, Kirk's got to be on that list, and he was. But this game, like I talked about Penn State, Ole Miss. Penn State's defense against Ole Miss's explosive offense. That's kind of the
Same
matchup
thing
that I see here, because the quarterback. Hey, how about the old quarterback from Tennessee, Michigan, Joe Milton, right? Remember, Joe Milton was a quarterback at Michigan, transferred to Tennessee right now. He's had a very good year. I was looking up at his numbers. He got, 20 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. So, I mean, he's playing very good. And Iowa's defense, as crazy as this sounds, they have gotten better as the year goes on. They ended up in the top 5 in almost every category defensively at the end of the year. So, this offense for Tennessee, they run for over 200. They're averaging, and they throw for 250. So they are a balanced offense. They're going to put probably as much pressure on this Iowa defense as these guys have seen all year. And they've got a good scheme down there. They know what they're doing. They're a veteran group. So it'll be a good challenge. Our man Deacon Hill is going to have to make some plays. They're going to have to. Iowa's going to have to score some points.
Listen, it's going to be interesting. Like with no Joe Milton, because those numbers were great. Josh Heupel's going to have to go with somebody else, and it's going to be an unknown factor. But that's not going to throw off Phil Parker. I mean, Phil Parker as a DC just always seems to have all the answers. Yeah. He's the Broyles Award winner as the nation's top assistant coach this year. It's Iowa, Tennessee, officially the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl. Terrific snack, by the way. I know they didn't have all these names when you were coaching them, but that's salt. I'm a salt guy, not a sweet guy. Always a salt guy. The Rose Bowl is as sweet as it gets. I've said it time and time again. I think I got to cover 9 or 10 of them in my time here at the Big Ten Network. There is no bowl game that feels like the Rose Bowl, and this one feels even bigger because in the rotation, last year before expansion, it is the college football playoff semifinal, Michigan and Alabama. I don't really understand, Dave, because you've heard this noise too. The general populace and the general public seems to believe that Alabama's the favorite, even though they're the number 4 seed. And the only reason they're in this game is because they came up with a completely almost impossible 4th down and 31 completion against Auburn in a game that they should have lost. Now, many people believe they're the favorite in this game. I don't get it. Michigan hasn't lost. They're 13-0. They've been in this position before. I think Michigan has a terrific chance to snap this 2-game semifinal losing skid and play for the Natty a week later.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are looking at history of the college football playoff and the success that Nick Saban has had, right? I mean, they're going to give Saban credit. Oh, he knows he's been in these games before. And you mentioned that pass against Auburn. Jalen Milroe, the quarterback from Alabama, I think when they look at Alabama's team, they think more explosiveness. And that's the one thing that I do believe that Harbaugh is going to have to do with J.J. McCarthy and company this week is we're going to have to make some more explosive plays. And it's set up. And when you got a running back like Blake Corum, one of the best in the country, and you're going to run the ball, it's not about how many big runs we get or how many yards we're necessarily getting. All we're doing, we're setting up some nice play-action passes. And right now, if you're Nick Saban, and he was on the staff, he started with Bill Belichick, so his focus is going to be what does Michigan do best? And we got to take away the run.
Yep.
We cannot let these guys do what they did to Penn State and on and on. So he's going to come in with a defense committed to take away the run. And to me, this is J.J. McCarthy's game, to make some plays in the passing game, because that, in my mind, is going to be the difference in Michigan winning, because their defense will match up. Everyone's talking about the speed at Alabama. Hey, and Jalen Milroe, their quarterback's doing a nice job now. 18 passing touchdowns and 4 interceptions. He's completing.
And he was nearly benched. He was benched earlier this year.
10 rushing touchdowns. Here's the key. That's what you were talking about earlier. Stress on a defense to defend the run, the pass, and the quarterback run. They will run him in this game. We'll see as many quarterback runs in this game as Michigan's seen all year long.
It's interesting that you want to see more explosives from Michigan. I do too, and I think they have the ability to do it. It almost seems like that's outside the comfort zone of Sharon Moore. When we saw him fill in for Jim Harbaugh was during that stretch where Michigan was running the football 75, 80% of the time. against this front of Alabama, as good as Michigan's offensive line is, and it is very good, I just don't think you're going to be able to ground and pound over and over again. They're too big, they're too strong, and they're too athletic to allow you to do that.
And Roman Wilson has proven that he'll make the plays, he'll make the catches. The tight Loveland,
Colston Loveland's phenomenal.
Tight end passes will be big, matching up against those linebackers from Alabama. So Michigan's got some good matchups. The intriguing thing is just going to be how much does Jim, how much is he willing to kind of open it up? I hate to use the word open it up. I don't want to put it because
it's a risk against an opportunistic defense like Alabama. It's a risk because you could be risking a fumble that goes the other way, a scoop and score, a pick six. That's hurt Michigan in the playoff over the last couple of years.
And you don't want to do something that you haven't done. All of a sudden, this offensive line is, if you got an hour practice and they're working 35 or 40 minutes on the run game, this isn't a game where you come out and say, okay, we're going to throw it 50 times, because that's not being fair to them either.
Yeah, you're not Dan Marino and the Miami Dolphins.
No, give your players in games like this, and I've been in a lot of championship games, give your players a chance to play fast and give your players a chance to win the game.
Win or lose, we are all over that showdown between Michigan and Alabama in the Rose Bowl. We have Media Day coverage coming up on Saturday night. We have coaches' press conferences on Sunday. Then New Year's Day, we preview not just the Rose, but all the Big Ten matchups at 11 Eastern. That's followed by a specific Rose Bowl pregame show, and then complete coverage when it is all over in Pasadena. If you're going to the game, even if the sunscreen is on early, bring a jacket late. When the sun goes behind those San Gabriel Mountains, it is glorious, but it gets chilly. It is all right here on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. We're not quite ready to launch back into Big Ten play, but it won't be long. And how about the Indiana Hoosiers sitting at 2-0 in Big Ten play? Now 9-3 overall. You see Illinois, Northwestern, Wisconsin, the other teams without a blemish on their Big Ten record. Now Purdue in the standings, because of the way the tiebreakers work, they're all the way down there toward the bottom half, but they're number one in the country at 11-1. Of course, that one loss coming on the road to Northwestern. Speaking of Purdue, former Boilermaker, former Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, Rafael Davis is with us. Happy belated Christmas. Happy holidays to you and yours. I'm sure it was fun at the Davis household with a couple of youngins running around.
It was unbelievable. It was awesome to see the Christmas joy in my daughter. This is her first year being old enough to know what's going on, to be excited for it, and to run down the stairs and wake everybody up.
That is so much fun. I'll tell you what's also fun is getting back into Big Ten play, and it's never too early to start talking about teams that have done enough before we even turn the calendar to 2024. They are discussing them as tournament teams that are likely to hear their names called on Selection Sunday. And you have a handful of those teams, and when you start at the top, you start with the team that's in the best shape, not just of all inside the Big Ten, but maybe in the country, and that's the Purdue Boilermakers. They have the win over Arizona. They have the 3 amazing wins out in Hawaii. I mean, Purdue right now is on track to be not just a 1 seed, but on track to be the number 1 overall seed.
Yeah, I think it's this year, you look at the Big Ten, it's Purdue's to lose. If they go out and they handle business, they take a winner's approach, and they come out with the mindset that we're going to run through the league, I think it's there for them. Zach Edey, obviously the best player in the country, and then there are 2 guards, now sophomores. You have Fletcher Lawyer, Braden Smith, who's turned into one of the better backcourts in the country. Lance Jones gives them something on both ends of the floor that helps them. And then they have utility guys at their power forward position with Caleb Furst, Trey Kaufman-Wren, and Mason Gillis. They have a team now, not only just as well-rounded offensively, but they get the job done defensively as well.
Can I make an argument that I think the loss to Northwestern was good based on when it happened and how it happened, for this team to understand what they have to do throughout the rest of the regular season, and also what they have to do once they get into a tournament setting to not let what happened last year against Fairleigh Dickinson bite them again.
Exactly. You look at that game against Northwestern, they were doing a really good job at post doubling, at trapping, at taking away the post. Although Zach was dominant, the guards got back to last year in the sense of not looking to get their game on. They didn't look to drive the basketball. Braden Smith didn't get into his pull-up. It was put the ball over your head and look for the big fella because it was working. And you see against Alabama, against Arizona, when Zach didn't have it going, Braden Smith was getting his game on. He was getting to that right hand. He was playing downhill. Fletcher Lloyd with 27 points against Arizona. Those 2 now are not as dependent on Zach Edey in the post. Now they're comfortable. And I talked to Fletcher Lawyer the other day. The biggest difference from his sophomore year to his freshman year is his confidence against anybody. Being able to go out there against Arizona and feel like he can play in that game and be successful in it. Last season, I don't know if they had that.
Now, early in January, it's January 5th, and I know that because both Rafael and I will be at Mackey for this game. It's Purdue against Illinois. Illinois was the second team on your list, a team that you really feel confident in, not just throughout the course of the rest of the regular season, but in the NCAA tournament. And I'm with you. I mean, Terrence Shannon Jr. has been all world, but we saw Quincy Guerrier can have his nights. Marcus Domask can have his nights. Coleman Hawkins can do things defensively. I think this is a really dangerous team, maybe a team that's even more dangerous when they get out of league play against non-conference competition in the tournament.
I could see Illinois making a run to a Final Four.
Totally agree.
Especially in the Elite Eight. You think about how they're built, 6'6" and above, and they're starting five. You got a point guard in Ty Rodgers, 6'7", 220 pounds. Your shooting guard and Terrence Shannon Jr., the best guard in the country. You look at that game going into Mackey Arena against Purdue. Those are the two guards that Braden Smith and Fletcher Loyer are going to have to match up with, and that's going to be tough. And now you've seen what Quincy Guerrier can do the last 3 games. He's averaged over 21 points a game. Coleman Hawkins has averaged 14 and 7, shooting at 38% from 3 over the last few games. Marcus Domask has hit him for 33 in Madison Square Garden. If Illinois can continue to find a way to rebound at a high level and continue to get post-production, I think they'll be right there with Purdue at the end of the season.
Listen, when you have a guy like Terrence Shannon Jr. who can take over games, who is the clear leader, who can do it from the inside and the outside, you get into the postseason, that's a guy that you can ride all the way to the Final Four. I'm buying what you're selling. Ohio State has surprised me this year. I'll be honest, I did not know what to expect from Chris Holtman's team. We've seen the evolution and the maturation of Bruce Thornton and Roddy Gale. Jamison Battle seems like a really nice fit. Zed Keys accepted a new role. This is a team that is clearly better than most people believe they'd be at this point.
They got a really good balance of some older guys that's been around the block a few times and some young, talented guys. You look at college basketball, players are going to make their biggest jump from their freshman to sophomore season, especially when they got a lot of burn their freshman year. You look at Bruce Thornton, made a huge jump. A guy like Roddy Gale, who came out of high school as a top 50 recruit, he was thinking he was going to be one and done. He got in the gym and turned himself into one of the better two-way players in the league. And then Jamison Battle, a couple seasons ago at Minnesota, averaged 17 points a game, was honorable mention all Big Ten. Now he's their third scorer on the team. If you have Jamison Battle as your third perimeter scorer and the opposing team is putting their third best defender on him, it's going to be a long night. Those 3 guys average over 47 points a game, 12 rebounds, 9 assists, makes them the best backcourt in the league as a 3-guard combo. And then you look at their front court production. I look at Zed Key, I look at Felix Akpara, and I look at them kind of how we used to look at Travion Williams and Zach Edey. You put Felix and Zed's numbers together, they're averaging 16 points, 12 rebounds, and 3 blocks. That's an all Big Ten caliber center. So you got that type of production with that type of core. It makes for a good season.
It makes sense of Michigan State for us because the beginning of the year made no sense. And before I get that, of course, we're all hoping for a quick and speedy recovery for Jeremy Fears, victim of a gunshot over the holidays back home. When it comes to getting back on the court, what does Michigan State have to do to consistently look like the team we saw decimate Baylor?
They've been playing well the last 3 or 4 games. They've been playing as a much more cohesive group, and Christmas break should have helped this team. Where you don't have guys on campus, students and fans, your team really has to come together, has to gel together. The practice time goes out the window. You start having 4 or 5 hour practices. They're tough, they're grinders, and you really come together as a unit. A.J. Hoggard is going to be a key because you know what Tyson Walker brings every single night. The last 3 games have been really good for A.J. 12 points a game, 7 assists on 58% from field goals. He's getting downhill to that right hand, getting back to the free throw line. Defensively, they're going to bring it, but it's all about getting those guards right on the offensive end.
I'm glad you brought up A.J. because I think it's another A.J. in Madison that's maybe making you a believer in the Badgers. They've had their ups and downs, but Wisconsin's also posted a couple of really good wins. They're back inside the top 25, and I think A.J. Storr is a huge reason why.
You look at the Chicago State game, they were stagnant outside of A.J. Storr. They did not look good. They were not looking cohesive in that first half, and A.J. Storr just decided to take the game over. 29 points in that game, cut the water off for Wesley Cordette, and then they just have an athletic guy that can get them out in transition and help them go when it gets stagnant in a half court. Sometimes Wisconsin last season, it was a lot of contested three-pointers, no one to break the defense down, get in the lane and make plays. AJ's that guy that can go and finish at the rim, that can get to the basket on his own. And then John Blackwell has been one of the better freshmen that we've seen, not just this year, but over the last few seasons. 18 minutes a game. He's given them 9 points, 4 rebounds, on 48% from three. And this is a freshman guard coming into high-level basketball. He's not even averaging a turnover. So he's been the big plus. Those two guys give Wisconsin an athletic edge that they've been missing.
Yeah, a couple of early season quality wins helping boost that resume as well. And speaking of early season quality wins, we already referenced the Northwestern win over Purdue. It is the feather in the cap for the Wildcats, who unfortunately, unlike Wisconsin, did fall to Chicago State in one of the more surprising outcomes all year long. Still, they're 9-2 overall this year. They have that win over Purdue. This looks very much like an NCAA tournament team to me.
And they still have Boo Buie, averaging 19-5 on the season, 45% from the field. He's the tone setter, the head of the snake. I mean, you look at Ryan Langborg coming into this season, they were expecting a lot. Didn't have his best game against Arizona State, but they were able to win that game by 20. The previous 4 games before that one, he was cooking. He started catching on. Brooks Barnheiser has been one of the better two-way players in the league. If Northwestern can find a way to get some production from Matt Nicholson, from Luke Hunger, and Preston, it doesn't have to be a lot, but if those 3 guys can get them maybe 10 points a game as a combo, 6 rebounds, it'll really help those guards out. And then Ty Berry, he can't go missing again. He's got to be consistent, doesn't have to be great.
And as Purdue learned, not just this year, but last year as well, Welsh Ryan Arena has become, and it got quiet there for a couple of years, it has back to being a legitimate home court advantage for the Wildcats. Couple minutes left here on Big Ten today as you look at Rafael Davis's Big Ten teams with best chances to make the tournament. We showed you in the previous block the teams that he believes right now would be in. These 2 teams, Nebraska and Maryland, perhaps with some work to do throughout the rest of conference play. Let's focus first on Nebraska. They're 10-2 overall. It's their best start in some 4 years. It may be Fred Hoiberg's best team. They have options. Rink Mast has been really good. Juwan Gary has been terrific now that he's back healthy. I think this is a team that can still upset some people throughout the rest of conference play.
I think if the season was to end today, I think Nebraska could get in. I think they have good wins. The win at Kansas State was impressive. They don't have a bad loss. When I look at Nebraska, I think, how long will it last? And is the Rink Mast, is that phenomenon, is it real? You look at the 2 Big Ten games that Nebraska has played, Rink Mast, being their best player, has really struggled. Only averaged 6 points, 9 rebounds on 38% from the field. If that continues, Nebraska, the wheels will fall off. But Juwan Gary, he's been outstanding over the season since coming back. 14 points a game, 7 rebounds, 54% from the field. You've seen the 18 rebounds at Kansas State, the 20 points against Michigan State. Bryce Williams can score in bunches. And if Keisei Tominaga, if he doesn't get going again, he's been struggling. Last 5 games, 26% from the 3. They need a point guard to give them some type of work on the offensive end to help Rink Mast and Tominaga.
I'm not sure he's entirely healthy. He doesn't quite look like the guy he was last year. Fred Hoiberg certainly needs him to play well. Maryland's fascinating. They beat the brakes off UCLA. It's not a great UCLA team, and UCLA made a huge comeback after Maryland went up huge. But to me, this boils down to 2 guys, right? It boils down to the play of Jameer Young and Julian Reese, and Dante Scott has to help.
Yep, and Dante Scott's been great the last 3 games actually, averaging 16 points, 6 rebounds, 6 of 13 from 3. Jameer Young was great at UCLA, 37 points, but Julian Reese has got to give him more on the road. 17-12 at home. On the road this season, Julian Reese is averaging 9 points and 6 rebounds. That's not going to be enough. But if those 3 guys, if they can be productive and efficient every single night, let those 2 freshmen grow in the form, Maryland could surprise a lot of people.
All right, now there may be some folks out there asking, why didn't I see Indiana? Is Indiana all about the letters right now, a TBD, because of the X factor, and that X factor, of course, being Xavier Johnson, and when he does return to this team?
You need some guard play. You need guard production to win at a high level, especially this season in the Big Ten where the backcourts are so tough. I know you play Kansas tough. Trey Galloway has 28, but how many games where Trey Galloway have 28 points in a game? I know you make 14 threes in the last game, and it looks like it's starting to turn the right corner, But how many times is Malik Renew going to go 4 for 4 from the three-point line?
Well, he'd never done it ever before he did it the other night.
Exactly. So if you don't have guards, if you don't make shots from perimeter with the Big Ten bigs, Khalil Ware and Malik Renew will not be able to dominate the post as they've done this season. You need guard production to win games.
Xavier Johnson comes back, though I do think absolutely this is an NCAA tournament team. And that will wrap up this edition of Big Ten Today. As always, appreciate you hanging with us. For Dave Wanstead and Ray Fell Davis, I'm Rick Pizzo. Enjoy the rest of the holiday break. It's almost over.